It's that time of year again. The time of year when shadows get longer, days get shorter, and the space between our world and the next gets just a little bit smaller. It also happens to be the time of year when everyone likes to gather around their favorite horror stories, and we here at Ono Anime are no different. That's why today we're going to be talking about a man whose unique visions of horror have touched you just a little more than you might think. A prolific manga artist and one of the Japanese masters of horror, Junji Ito. Born in 1963 in Gifu Prefecture, Junji Ito was influenced from a young age by the drawings and art style of his sister, as well as the work of early horror manga artists like Kazuo Umezu, Hideshi Hino, and Yasutaka Tsutsui, as well as the works of famous Western author H.P. Lovecraft. Ito submitted his first work to a shoujo magazine in 1987, and since then has published numerous successful series and short stories and won countless awards for his unique visions. One of these short stories is something you're sure to have seen if you grew up in the internet age, even if you've never heard of Junji Ito by name: The Enigma of the Amigara Fault. It was published in 2002, but didn't begin to see widespread popularity in the West until the mid-2000s, where it was posted on image boards like 4chan, later spreading to larger sites like Reddit, solidifying its place as both popular creepypasta and full-on meme today. Despite his reputation for brutal and horrifying horror stories, Junji Ito the man is surprisingly pleasant and well-adjusted, as evidenced by his sparing use of black humor in some of his works, extra panels making fun of his own writing process, and even a short comedy manga series he wrote about his cats called Junji Ito's Cat Diary. While Ito is known for his numerous short stories and compilations, today we're going to be talking about his three equally influential long-form works: Tomie, Uzumaki, and Gyo. Each of these stories is exemplary in different ways of Junji Ito's signature storytelling and art styles that make his unique work stand out to even the most casual observer. Tomie was Ito's first published work, starting serialization in 1987 and running sporadically until 2000 when it finally finished. The story revolves around the titular character Tomie, an immortal being that takes the form of a beautiful girl similar to a succubus. She possesses an unnatural and all-encompassing power to make any man fall in love with her, eventually throwing her followers tumbling off the brink of sanity and sending them into a murderous bloodlust, ending in Tomie's murder at their hands. Tomie is killed violently again and again, but a sinister purpose lies beneath each death. A new, fully grown Tomie can grow from any piece of the original's body, causing Tomie to spread like a virus exponentially. Tomie introduces for the first time a theme that is perhaps most central to Junji Ito's storytelling, a theme that we like to call the descent into madness. Ito clearly takes a perverse pleasure in driving his characters to the brink of sanity and sometimes even hurling them off of it. This descent is distilled every time Tomie sets her sights on a new victim in the story, as we see Ito portray this fall into the depths of insanity not only as psychological, but physically represented in his art as well. The victim's back becomes hunched over, limbs seem to stretch out as the face becomes more and more gaunt, eyes bulge while at the same time being shrouded in shadow. In Ito's works, this descent into madness is more often than not associated with an unhealthy obsession, whether natural or unnatural. In Tomie, this obsession is clearly defined as one simply over Tomie's beauty, and it's this poisonous beauty that causes character after character to tumble over the edge. It's shown repetitively in Tomie, and yet it never loses its impact or becomes any less terrifying. It's no wonder that Ito's examinations of madness and obsession are so astute, given his self-proclaimed love of H.P. Lovecraft. From moment one in Tomie, it's clear that Junji Ito loves to stretch the rules of the worlds that he builds. Arguably the most interesting conceit of Tomie's premise is the ability for Tomie to regenerate and multiply from detached body parts, and this idea gets tested in new and even more unexpected ways in each chapter. You'd expect Tomia to be able to grow from a detached limb, but would probably be surprised to see her growing horrifically out of a blood splatter on a wall, or taking over an unwitting hospital patient's body through an organ transplant. Another signature Ito quirk introduced for the first time in Tomie is his endings. They're often purposefully open-ended or unsatisfying, leaving the reader with a sense of foreboding or terrified wonder. He leaves your mind to wander, imagining what could happen after the story ends, letting your own brain do some of the work for him. These open-ended finales often summon the existential, which ties heavily into a central theme of Ito's works, the inevitability of one's own demise. A great deal of Ito's stories see a protagonist fighting against an all-powerful force, only to succumb to it in the end, and Tomie really does a great job of introducing this idea, as chapter after chapter of otherwise good people fall prey to her powers and, eventually, give in to them. Uzumaki, literally translated as Spiral, was Junji Ito's second long-form work, originally running from 1998 to 1999. It tells the story of the citizens of Kurozucho, a fictional town on the Japanese seaside afflicted by a supernatural curse involving spirals. The story again deals with some of Ito's signature themes, such as battling against an inevitable force, subverts the symbol of the spiral, which is usually positively represented in Japanese culture, and introduces several new themes that would become heavily associated with Ito's catalog as a whole. A quite notable part of Junji Ito's signature brand of storytelling is body horror, and I think in no other tale is it more uniquely presented than Uzumaki. The idea of a horror story centered around an ambiguous concept like a particular shape is certainly strange, and manifesting that in something as tangible as body horror is no small feat, which is why Uzumaki is so interesting. It's clear that from the beginning, Ito immersed himself in the spiral in order to come up with ideas for the story, not unlike those who suffer from the spiral obsession within the fiction he created. The spiral is a fairly common shape within nature, and Ito uses this to his advantage, painting horrific visions of people contorting their bodies in impossible ways, or gradually and grotesquely transforming into human-sized snails. Through the destruction of the recognizable human form, Ito transforms a whimsical and positive shape into one of grotesque psychedelia and terror, training his readers with each successive chapter to be more and more repulsed by the spiral. Uzumaki also contains some even more interesting looks at the descent into madness and its coupling with unhealthy obsession, this time centered around an obsession with spirals. Ito expands on this central theme that he set up first in Tomie by tying it intrinsically into the brand of body horror present in Uzumaki, so that as several key characters throughout the manga begin to quite literally spiral psychologically, their body changes and morphs as the state of their mind deteriorates. It's through this physical manifestation of mania that Ito can introduce Uzumaki's terrifying yet strangely beautiful sense of visual psychedelia, with limbs twirling unnaturally around each other and the recognizable human form being corrupted fluidly beyond all recognition. My favorite example of this is early on in the story, when the first resident of the town is afflicted with the spiral obsession. It starts small and subtle at first, but eventually completely takes over all aspects of his life, and as he again quite literally spirals towards an inevitable dark conclusion, his horrified family finds his body coiled up grotesquely inside a circular container. So begins the inevitable death spiral of the citizens of Kurozucho. Gyo is Junji Ito's third and most recent long-form story, having been published from 2001 to 2002. Gyo is an alternate reading of the kanji for fish, and that's a pretty on-the-nose title considering the story's subject matter. It concerns a national crisis that happens when fish and other sea creatures with legs begin to come ashore across Japan and attack citizens, causing the fabric of society to erode and an apocalyptic scenario to unfold. Gyo continues to explore themes presented in Ito's earlier works, while also expanding into his own examination of apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic fiction, as well as the subject matter allowing him to supplant pure human body horror with a more broad visual theme, in particular reference to sea creatures. Ito's works often touch on the breakdown of society, digging into how horrific or unexpected events can cause the moral fabric that makes up our everyday lives to break down. However, rarely does he go as far as he does in Gyo, depicting not the societal order of, say, a community or town breaking down, but instead showing us a vision of a complete and total apocalypse from start to finish. Ito's imagining of the apocalypse in Gyo of course carries some common themes of his work, interweaving the inevitable nature of our demise into an unstoppable force of legged fish and the disease that they bring with them to create yet another existential crisis for our main character and, in this story at least, an entire country. But this end-of-the-world scenario also presents us with another Junji Ito storytelling technique that's worth examining: escalation. In Gyo, what starts as a chance encounter with a curious legged fish soon evolves and escalates into a full-on global catastrophe that threatens the existence of the human race. With each successive chapter, Ito escalates the danger facing the characters in his tale at such a pace that it starts to feel like a runaway freight train, barely holding together under the weight of the catastrophic circumstances being piled on. This sort of escalation is present in his other works like Uzumaki, but as I said before, rarely does Ito take his escalating scenarios this far. It feeds into his common descent into madness theme as well, making the reader feel as if things could not get any worse, that a character cannot possibly become more broken or depraved, and then, to their horror, showing them that it is indeed possible, just as anything is possible inside one of Junji Ito's worlds. And that anything goes over-the-top style brings us to a final theme in Junji Ito's works that is highly underrated and very present in Gyo: black comedy. It was stated earlier in the video that Ito is a remarkably well-adjusted and funny person despite the subject matter he writes about, and perhaps nowhere else in his long-form works does this come out more than in Gyo. Ito's style of escalating catastrophic circumstances beyond the reader's expectations can sometimes go over the top, turning what was a terrifying scenario into one that carries its own brand of humor, macabre though it is. It's a remarkable technique and one that I don't think horror writers use enough in their works. As someone who doesn't normally derive enjoyment from horror works, being able to laugh during an otherwise disturbing tale feels great. Ito can sometimes make the reader laugh to spite themselves, and the reader is certainly more open to it if for no other reason than to diffuse their own terror and feel lighter for a bit. It's for this reason why pivotal moments in Gyo, like introducing an airship powered by a dead man's bodily gases, can feel so funny. With Junji Ito being one of the most influential horror mangaka in Japan, it's no small wonder that several of his works have been adapted for stage and screen. The most successful and far-reaching of these adaptations is the film series based on Tomia, which started in 1998 with 9 films made to date. Uzumaki was also adapted for a live-action film in the year 2000, and several of his short works have been adapted for different live-action productions, such as TV dramas and feature films. So far, the only anime adaptation of an Ito work has been 2012's Gyo Tokyo Fish Attack. Animated by UFO Table, a highly regarded animation studio known for their visually stunning works, it's a 75-minute original video animation that isn't very critically successful or far-reaching, mostly because some significant changes were made to the original source material that, for some viewers, cheapened the experience. However, Gyo Tokyo Fish Attack soon won't be the only Junji Ito anime adaptation. Earlier in 2017, it was announced that Studio Dean would be producing a horror anthology series of Ito's works, with the first key visual hinting at excerpts from Tomie and short stories like Fashion Model, Further Tales of Oshikiri, Soichi, Lovesick Dead, and Slug Girl. We won't go into the minute details of the staff that they've announced, short of saying that they don't inspire much confidence, unfortunately. Pretending that this announcement doesn't exist for a second, it's clear that Junji Ito's works deserve a good, long-form anime adaptation. The most obvious choice would be Uzumaki, since Gyo has already recently been adapted as an anime, and Tomie has an incredibly successful and long-running film series that Ito himself endorses and respects. A 12 or 13 episode anime could easily cover the complete tale of Uzumaki, with its self-contained chapters suiting the format of an episodic TV anime quite well. The biggest challenge for any animation and art direction team would be properly adapting Ito's signature art style, especially since very little of Uzumaki is presented in color and is all the more stunning for it. It seems that studios known in 2017 for being visually distinct and outside the norm, like MAPPA or Bones, could properly suit this visual style while also elevating it using the medium of anime. But as of now, we can only look forward to Studio Dean's anthology series and hope that it gives Junji Ito and all of his fans the anime adaptation we so rightly deserve. This Halloween, many of you will be looking for media that scares and entertains you. And now that you know just a little more about them, we hope you'll seek out the works of Junji Ito for yourselves. The 3 works we focused on today, Tomie, Uzumaki, and Gyo, are all available in some remarkably well-made and good-looking collected editions from Viz Media. In addition, you can find various short story collections and anthology series through other publishers and online sources. Junji Ito's influence on the horror genre can't possibly be overstated, and when you experience his works for the first time, we guarantee they'll leave you with a fright you won't soon forget.